Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we'll be leaning back into the past. A past with no LED lights, no dish dryers, and certainly no sleek Scandinavian minimalist kitchens. Back then, a simple wooden spoon could accompany you through an entire lifetime. And at times, it did more than you might expect. You may not survive this tale, because the life of a medieval peasant was far from easy. In fact, it was rather like playing a survival game, where every tool was made of wood, coarse cloth, or an unsteady hope that perhaps today it will not rain. Among the few possessions you truly owned was a spoon, and it wasn't just for scooping gruel. You would find yourself holding it to stir potions, swat flies, tap the pot when the children refused to come to dinner, and in some unfortunate cases, wield it in self-defense when a rat wandered in at midnight. A spoon could be the hourglass of a meal, the ruler of greed when portions were divided. A magic wand in the eyes of children, the mark of a household's identity. Some spoons had passed through 3 generations, some were bent from having once dug earth for planting onions, and some carried a faint scorch mark, a quiet memory of a night when the fire burned too long because the children forgot to stir the pot. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It is always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together let us ease into tonight's story. Chapter 1. You wake up with a spoon in your hand, the friend who slept beside you all night. You blink awake on an old straw mattress. It may have been soft once, perhaps 10 harvests ago. Now it feels more like a brittle battlefield of weeds and the memories of field mice. You lie on your side, your back aching as though a herd of oxen had trampled over you in your dreams. And the first thing you feel is the solid handle of a spoon pressing up beneath your palm. Yes, you had held the spoon tight all through the night. In fact, you are quite used to that. Others may clutch a pillow, a blanket, even a wife. You hold a spoon, a habit both practical and preventative. In this village, a spoon is worth as much as a healthy laying hen. Losing your spoon may well mean having to borrow one from a neighbor come morning. And no one likes to borrow spoons, just as no one enjoys wearing someone else's underclothes. You loosen your fingers and regard your spoon in the pale light filtering through the wall. A spoon of oak, darkened to honey brown, its edge slightly warped from a mishap with an over-enthusiastic batch of jam. A small crack in the handle is wrapped in hemp twine, not elegant but solid. A true family heirloom, passed from your father when you married. A well-behaved spoon never betrays you, never falls from your pocket at market, never takes sides in an unfair division of portions. A trustworthy friend. You sigh and stretch, your shoulder joints creak like a wooden barrel long in need of oiling. A new day begins, and once again the spoon will follow you everywhere. First, breakfast. You drag yourself from the straw, feet touching the cold earth, as cold as stones buried in the riverbed. No matter, you are used to it. The cold seeps into your spine, waking you better than any church bell ever could. You tend the hearth. Yesterday's ashes still smell faintly of smoke. You rake out a few small sticks, blow softly, then toss on a bundle of dry twigs. The fire stirs to life reluctantly, like an old man rising stiffly in winter. You set the pottage pot upon the flames. Thin porridge, a few leftover oats, some wilted greens, and a pinch of salt, the only thing left to give it flavor. Now it is time for the spoon to perform. You take the spoon and stir the pot evenly, carefully. Without stirring, the porridge would scorch at the bottom. And if it does, you will be blamed. Here, a person who stirs porridge well may be as respected as one who bakes fine bread. The spoon glides through the thickening porridge, swirling into slow circles like the eddies of time. There is something meditative in this motion. You stir as though soothing your own heart. Suddenly, a rustle from the corner. You look up. Alert, a fat mouse peers out from a crack in the wall. Its eyes gleam like 2 black beans. It watches you. You watch it. 2 beings who live off porridge, locked in silent confrontation. You lift the spoon, no longer to stir. You strike the pot's rim with a sharp crack. The mouse starts and flees, leaving behind a faint sour odor. You smirk, a small victory to start the day. The porridge bubbles. You scoop a spoonful to taste, as bland as old tears. But no matter. Here, survival is a victory. Enjoyment is the privilege of the rich. You ladle porridge into wooden bowls for the family. 3 full spoonfuls per person. No more, no less. The art of fair division is a crucial skill. 1 careless extra spoonful could spark an argument that lasts until harvest. The children, grimy and eager, crowd the table, watching your spoon move as if it were a sword of justice. You ladle each portion slowly, your gaze cool, your hand steady. This is a moment to display an unshakable fairness. After the meal, you tuck the spoon into your belt. Not everyone carries a spoon, but you do. You once witnessed an old man who forgot his, forced to borrow the village girl's tiny spoon to scoop honey. That tale is still told at market. You have no wish to become the next subject of such stories. You step outside. Pale sunlight filters through the morning mist. The spoon swings at your side, a quiet reminder that today it will once again prove its worth. In a world without proper cutlery, without convenient food containers, and especially without room for the careless, a good spoon can be everything. And you know it will be your companion through many small perils yet to come today. Chapter 2. Breakfast. Using a spoon to awaken a lazy pot of porridge, you might think that a medieval peasant's breakfast would be quick and simple. It was not. It was a quiet negotiation between you and the laziest pot of porridge in the entire village. You would begin by adding water to the pot. Water that had been boiled the day before, so you wouldn't have to go fetch more this morning. The well was far, and the morning fog was as thick as the prayers of the village widows. Once the water was poured in, you would take your wooden spoon, your loyal companion, and give it a careful stir. The pot would respond with a faint bubble or two, as if mocking you. There was some leftover porridge stuck at the bottom. Though it could no longer be called porridge, it was now a damp layer of rubber, capable of clinging to every known surface of mankind. If left alone, it would soon sink deeper into the pot, like the soul of an old priest unwilling to leave his church. You stirred harder. The wooden spoon would creak softly with each circle, like the weary sigh of an old cow seeing its morning hay trampled. One hand held the pot steady. The other kept stirring. The motion resembled an exorcism, more than cooking, each rotation a gentle reminder to the porridge. Today you will yield to me, or you will become a treat for the pigs. Slowly, a smell would begin to rise. Old oats, a trace of dry grass, and possibly a hint of smoke. You would glance at the hearth. The coals still glowed red, but the flames flickered as though asking, "Are you quite sure this dish is worth the effort?" You would not answer. If flames could speak, they would have quit this job long ago. Minutes passed. You stirred with a steady rhythm, as if you were some master baker. If that baker had but 1 spoon and a patience forged from years of dividing porridge among 3 hungry children. Footsteps echoed from the loft. The children were awake. You heard soft arguments, followed by a thud as someone tumbled off a straw mattress. Soon they would shuffle into the kitchen, eyes barely open, mouths ready to demand food. You looked into the pot, wondering if there would be enough for them. Perhaps, if you portioned wisely. If you didn't happen to take 1 too large spoonful for yourself. If the day was kind. And then, the long-awaited moment arrived. The porridge began to thicken. The gentle swirls turned to rippling waves. The bubbling now sounded more like breathless panting. The pot had surrendered. You allowed yourself a small smile. Not all battles require bloodshed. Some only ask for a good spoon and firm resolve. You paused, lifting the spoon to check. The tip was tinged yellow, the edges warm to the touch. This was a tool of many talents, stirring porridge, chasing mice, measuring ingredients, and now testing the success of your morning efforts. You tasted a small spoonful. Bland, as always. But bland was better than burnt. A lesson learned after 3 scorched pots the previous year. Your mother had looked at you as though you had destroyed the entire autumn grain store. You added a small pinch of salt. Not too much. Salt was white gold. more precious than a sound pair of shoes. And a sound pair of shoes was more precious than any promise made at the market fair. While waiting for the porridge to cool, you prepared the table, a low wooden table warped with age and damp. You tapped the spoon lightly against its surface, a silent signal passed down from your grandfather's time. It meant, "Come eat." Sure enough, the children wandered in like hungry sparrows, eyes half shut, hair a mess, bare feet on cold floor. They spoke no words. At their age, they already understood. The spoon held by the one who stirred the pot carried power equal to a lord. To argue was to go hungry. You began to serve. 1 full spoonful for the eldest. 1.5 for the youngest, still sick, needing a little extra. 1 for your wife. You glanced down at what remained, just enough for a small bowl for yourself. As always. You scooped your own portion, but did not eat yet. There was a small moment each morning you always reserved for yourself. A moment when everyone else had taken their spoon and sat quietly, sipping. You would hold your own spoon and watch it in the dim firelight. It had been with you through many years. It had once scooped honey on your wedding day. It had stirred thin wine on the longest winter night. It had helped portion out porridge for your ailing father. A spoon cannot speak, but it remembers. You ate slowly, spoonful by spoonful. The porridge remained bland, but that mattered little. What could be better here in this season? A bowl of warm porridge, a glowing hearth, a familiar spoon, and a long day ahead, in which you would need it once again for tasks no one could yet foresee. Because in this village, you might go without money, you might go without shoes, you might go without sleep, but to go without a spoon, that would never do. Chapter 3: The Spoon and the Secret Art of Peasant Measurement. You might think that medieval peasants had no sense of measurement, but in truth, we measured everything. Just not with scales, not with measuring cups, not with any tool that possessed a respectable unit. We used a spoon. 1 spoon, the very one you are holding now. It was the village's standard of measure. A tool tested through dozens of winters, hundreds of porridge pots, and countless skeptical glances from wives. You would hold the spoon up, examining it under the faint light, the handle slightly bent, the bowl worn smooth. A full spoon was a full spoon. A heaping spoonful was still a spoon, though in disputes it might count as half or even a third, depending on who was arguing. This morning you planned to bake. A luxury. Today there happened to be a bit of leftover oat flour, some salt, and a small piece of lard. You had traded 3 eggs for it the other day. A good bargain, though the hens now looked at you as if you were a traitor. You poured the flour into a bowl. There was no written recipe, but the village wisdom went something like this: 3 spoonfuls of flour, 1 spoonful of lard, 2 spoonfuls of water, a pinch of salt. A pinch depended on the cook's pride. Some pinched with 2 fingers, some with the whole hand, as if scooping grain. But you trusted the spoon. You scooped the first spoonful of flour and tipped it into the bowl, a second, then a third. Each spoonful pressed carefully, as though weighing gold. 1 tilted spoon, 1 careless pour, and your bread might taste as salty as a curse. You cut the lard into small pieces, then used the spoon to scrape it in. A shining spoonful of lard glistened like a poor man's jewel. You added it to the bowl with reverence, as though performing a fire ritual. Water was easier. You scooped 2 spoonfuls, 1 full, 1 less so. Full or not depended on your mood. Today, you wanted the dough soft. Soft bread would bring more laughter from the children, and laughter here was a rare kind of music. You sprinkled in the salt. You had once considered using the spoon to measure salt, but you remembered your father's advice. Salt is not measured by spoon. It is measured by the guilt you feel after the meal. You pinched a little and scattered it lightly. Now it was time to mix. You lifted the spoon, began to stir. The spoon turned round and round, like the sun circling above those too busy to look up. The dough thickened. You stopped. Tapped the spoon 3 times against the bowl. A small ritual, for as your grandmother had said, if you failed to tap 3 times, the bread would crack, and cracked bread would be seen as a bad omen. In this village, cracked bread could ruin a wedding, You shaped the dough into small pieces, using the spoon to flatten them. A good spoon could replace any other kitchen tool. The worn groove on your spoon's handle pressed the dough just so. A skill honed over 5 lean winters. You stoked the hearth again, set the pan to heat. Once hot enough, you used the spoon to scoop portions of dough, dropping them in. The lard hissed, a sound as cheerful as old women whispering ghost stories by the fire. You turned the bread, not with a knife, not with a spatula, but with the spoon. Its edge flipped each piece with a deft motion the villagers still considered a minor form of magic. The scent of baking bread filled the house. The children gathered in, sitting patiently, eyes fixed on the pan like cats watching pork hung too high to reach. You served the bread onto plates, and once more the spoon became the judge. You cut each piece with the spoon, slice by even slice. Each child received a portion. Your wife received a slightly larger one. You were not foolish enough to forget that. You kept the smallest portion for yourself. But it did not matter. You knew the true reward was seeing the children smile, faces shiny with grease, fingers clutching hot bread. You sat down and picked up the spoon once more. Its bowl was still warm. You thought of all the times it had measured flour, stirred porridge, scooped water, divided portions. It was a scale that never lied to you, a scale with no numbers, only memory and habit. And then you smiled, because you knew that tomorrow, when the flour ran low again, when the salt grew scarce and the water turned cloudy, the spoon would still help you measure each last drop of hope in this small kitchen. Chapter 4. Lunch in the Fields. A spoon that does more than serve. You know, lunch out in the fields was never quite like the pictures you might see in books. No woven basket filled with golden loaves, no crisp cloth laid across the grass, no sparkling glass of wine beneath the summer sun. Out here, a peasant's lunch was little more than a worn cloth sack, a wooden bowl chipped with age, and a faithful wooden spoon swinging at your side with each step through the soft earth still heavy with dew. You had been in the field since early morning, your back bent beneath the weight of each strike of the hoe, and the earth this season, it was thick, clinging greedily to the blade as if unwilling to surrender even the smallest crumb of itself. Your hands were calloused, your shirt soaked through, the sweat sinking deep into its threadbare fabric, and when the sun climbed high, when the shadows grew too short to shield anyone, you knew it was time to rest. Not because someone rang a bell, not because anyone called, but because your arms began to tremble ever so slightly and your stomach began to drum its hollow, hungry rhythm. You found a flat stone, resting quietly among the grass, claiming it, for now, as your dining table. You spread a rough cloth upon it. From your bag, you drew a bowl of cold porridge, carefully wrapped that morning, still faintly scented with wood smoke. And when your spoon emerged from its familiar fold, you touched its handle lightly with your fingertips. A small ritual no one had taught you, but one that had become habit across many a season. You stirred the porridge slowly, steadily. Its surface had set into a thin, stubborn skin, stretchy, tough, like the aged hide of something long past its prime. You broke it gently with a slow turn of the wrist. A faint, bland aroma rose, far from tempting, yet still the smell of something that would see you through the rest of the day. You lifted the first spoonful to your mouth. Cold porridge, its taste as flat as the half-hearted greeting of a neighbor you would rather avoid. But you ate, because here flavor was a luxury, fullness was survival. You had just begun the second spoonful when a familiar sound interrupted you, a low, persistent buzzing. A fly large as a pea, striped belly gleaming, circled above the bowl as though it had reserved a seat since the day before. You raised your spoon, flicking it lightly, precise as a knight with a lance, if that knight were mounted on an old ox and dueling insects. The fly dodged, hovering now just out of reach, but far enough for you to continue your meal, though with one eye kept wary. You ate on. Then came another sound, slicing through the fragile quiet of the midday break. A rustle from the bushes behind you. You set your spoon down, held your breath. It could be a rabbit, a weasel, or worse, the neighbor's child, spying to see if you had brought anything tastier today. You picked the spoon back up, this time with a firmer grip. No one issued you shield or sword out here. But a spoon, held just right, could still persuade a curious soul to think twice. You leaned and looked past the brush. It was only a stray cat. Its head low, eyes gleaming like small green jewels beneath the shadowed leaves. You exhaled, raising the spoon ever so slightly in a silent message. "This is mine. Don't even think about it." The cat understood. It turned away, with that familiar blend of feline pride and disdain. You returned to your porridge, eating each spoonful slowly, carefully. Out here, not every enemy wore armor or carried a blade. Some had 4 legs and soft fur. Worse yet, some had 2 legs, mischievous laughter, and the wide-eyed hunger of children lying in wait. You finished the last spoonful, carefully scraped the spoon along the bowl's edge, leaving no trace behind to invite flies, ants, or the creeping disappointment of an unsatisfied belly. You licked the spoon lightly, not from hunger, but because it was the surest way to keep it clean when water was scarce. A clean spoon would not ruin the next meal, and would not send you back to work with an aching stomach. You tucked the spoon back into your pocket, tightened the cloth knot. It returned once more to the role of silent companion. You stood, gripped your hoe, and as you looked across the fields still stretching beneath the bright sun, you knew that by afternoon, when you needed to stir water, scoop seed, or fend off some insolent crow, that same spoon would serve you yet again. Because out here, in this world, a spoon does not merely serve. It shields you from the countless small misfortunes lying in wait beyond the grass. Chapter 5. Entertainment for Children. When a spoon becomes a magical toy. On those rare idle days, meaning the ones when rain fell without pause, the fields were soaked through, and everyone was trapped indoors, children would invent all manner of foolish games to pass the time. And nothing captured their imaginations more than a spoon. Yes, a spoon. While you, the adult, regarded the spoon as an essential tool for stirring porridge, scooping soup, or measuring flour to the children, it was a treasure, a magical object capable of anything. That day, the rain had begun in the early morning. It fell in a steady rhythm, like the droning of monks half asleep during a long chant. The rain turned the yard into a swamp, the village paths into muddy streams, and the mood of everyone inside into a mixture of boredom and reluctant acceptance. You sat by the hearth, spoon in hand, stirring a pot of hot water, a task that hardly needed doing, but one that kept your hands and mind occupied, when there was little else to watch beyond the endless grey of the rain. The 3 children had long since exhausted their patience. There were no toys, no books. You were not wealthy enough for books, and even if you had them, no one here could read. The eldest had taken to banging a garlic pestle against the table. The youngest was chewing idly on a corner of their tunic. Then their eyes all settled on the spoon in your hand. And you knew exactly what that meant. Barely a minute later, the spoon was in the middle child's grip, clutched like a prized relic. All 3 gathered around, whispering and scheming like a council of elders deciding the fate of a kingdom. They soon decided that the spoon would become a magical horse. A stick was tied across for ears. A bit of string made the reins. The handle became its neck, the bowl its head, round and shining. A proud and silent steed. The youngest took the spoon in hand, galloping around the house, whinnying like a wild horse across an open plain, though in reality circling the hearth, the cupboard, and the pile of damp firewood. Soon enough, the spoon changed roles. This time, it was a wizard's staff. The eldest raised it high, solemnly chanting spells. A strange mixture of lullaby, half-remembered prayer, and a string of invented words that sounded like a piglet stuck in a chimney. You sat and watched the scene unfold, sighing. This spoon had stirred countless pots of porridge. It had once saved you from a fat kitchen rat. It had divided portions at many a serious meal. Now it was a horse, then a staff, and soon a drumstick. By afternoon, when the rain still showed no sign of ending, the children invented more roles. The middle child proposed turning the spoon into a boat. They fetched a small wooden basin, filled it with water, and set the spoon afloat. An intrepid vessel braving the high seas. You watched this quietly, speaking in an even tone, like the wind seeping through the cracks in the wooden walls. Be sure it doesn't sink. If that boat takes on water, we'll have no spoon for tomorrow's porridge." All three children burst into laughter. The youngest solemnly nodded, then carefully retrieved the spoon and wiped it dry with a tattered scrap of cloth, handling it as though it were a national treasure. By dusk, as the light dimmed, the spoon became a percussion instrument. An old brass bowl was turned upside down. The spoon tapped against it, sending uneven rhythms echoing through the house. It was not music, not really, but it was the only sound worth hearing on a rain-drenched day that seemed to stretch without end. You sat in silence, listening to the clumsy beats. There was something oddly comforting about knowing that this small, worn object, once serving by the hearth and in the fields, had now become the center of the children's joy on this grey afternoon. When night finally came and the children, spent and drowsy, fell asleep beside the hearth, you picked up the spoon. Its handle was sticky with sap, the bowl dusted with ash. You wiped it clean, carefully, stroke by stroke, until the wood was smooth and warm beneath your fingers once more. You tucked the spoon back into your pocket, giving it one gentle stroke, as though wishing your faithful companion good night. Another day had passed, and the spoon had lived yet another small, magical life. As a toy, as a boat, as a wizard's staff. And when needed, it would be once again. A steady spoon in your hand come tomorrow morning's porridge. Chapter 6. The Times You Wished For. Just one more spoon. There are days when you will realize that one spoon alone is not enough for a peasant's life. Tonight is one of those days. There is a small feast in the village, not a grand feast, just the end of harvest celebration. When the barley has been stored away, the turnips have all been pulled, and the villagers are still alive to face yet another winter. A reason good enough to gather, light a fire, and eat something a little better than the usual thin porridge. You bring your spoon along, hanging carefully at your side. To attend a feast without a spoon is a careless act. You had once seen an old man who had forgotten his spoon, sitting through the entire evening in shame. When finally handed one, he held it as though it were a live frog. And the tale has lived on at market days ever since. The feast is laid out in the elder's yard, a long wooden plank set atop rough logs. Around it, low stools, high stools, three-legged chairs, and a few makeshift stumps. You find a seat near the end of the table. A good seat, not too near the noisy children, not next to the old women who peer too closely into other people's bowls. On the table, there is bread, vegetable soup, and a great pot of stew. Its aroma drifting across the yard like a trap set for every empty stomach. You place your spoon on the table, bowl facing up. A quiet signal that you are ready to fight for your share. The trouble begins when the food arrives. Each person serves themselves. But with only one spoon, you must choose your strategy wisely. You use the spoon for soup first, a safe choice. But when it comes time for the stew, a problem arises. Your spoon still glistens with soup oil. And if you dip it straight into the stew pot, you will be met with looks reserved for those who have relieved themselves in the village well. No apology will suffice. You glance around. Some diners have two spoons, one large for serving, one small for eating. A luxury you have never attained. You have only one spoon, an heirloom passed through 3 generations. You wipe the spoon against your sleeve, a subtle motion, though the woman beside you frowns faintly. You ignore it. There is no other choice. And you scoop a full spoonful of stew, solemnly transferring it to your bowl as though presenting a sacred offering. With the stew served, you soon realize there is bread to be spread with honey. Once again, your spoon must go to battle. You have wiped it carefully, yet a trace of oil remains. You try to rest it against the side of your bowl, hoping no one will notice. But clearly, luck is not on your side today. The child next to you, a born mischief maker, leans in and asks softly, "Sir, your spoon smells like soup." You smile thinly, nodding, "Then it will taste even better, little one." The child giggles, the adults pretend not to hear. But you know, from this moment onward, your spoon will become a side topic of conversation. You continue the meal, now handling your spoon with greater care. Each change of course brings another careful wiping, as though you are preparing it for a baptism. But by the time the final dish arrives, sweet porridge with fruit preserves, You know your spoon is beyond saving, carrying a mix of flavors from 3 different courses. You sigh, accepting fate. After all, a full belly matters more than the spoon's pride. You lift a spoonful of sweet porridge. The taste of fruit mingles with stew, with just a hint of soup oil, creating a curious symphony of flavors that only a village feast can produce. When the meal ends, you wipe the spoon one last time and tuck it away in your pocket. You glance at those with 2 spoons, 3 spoons, even an elder with a silver spoon reserved for dessert. You feel no envy, only a passing thought. Perhaps next time I should bring a second spoon. But then you smile. For after all, your old spoon had performed every task asked of it. Refused no dish, broke no bowl, caused no illness. And in this world, that is no small achievement. You rise, pat your pocket lightly, feeling the familiar handle beneath your fingers. Another day has passed, and the spoon will walk beside you once more, ready for whatever new challenges await. In the kitchen, in the fields, or amid a feast full of quiet traps like tonight. Chapter 7. The Wooden Spoon. An accidental gardening tool. Some tools are born for the garden. Hoe, spade, rake, soil knife. And then there is the spoon, an object that, if you were to ask any blacksmith, they would tell you straight away that is not a gardening tool. But then you might ask a poor peasant, one with a single old hoe chipped at one corner, a dull old knife, and a wooden spoon stained deep with the smoke of many years by the hearth. The answer would be quite different. That day, the sun had just returned after days of rain. A soft sun, pale and yellow, just enough to stir in you a certain feeling, that if you didn't tend the garden today, there might be no vegetables left to harvest tomorrow. You grabbed the hoe, slipped the knife through your belt, dropped the spoon into your pocket as always. Not quite intending to use it, but habit is a hard thing to break. You stepped out into the back garden. The soil was still damp. The weeds were rejoicing like children given a holiday. The vegetables lay slumped, waiting to be tended. First task, scraping the moss that clung to the edge of the dry well. You thought of using the knife, but then remembered the last time you'd slipped and chipped away a piece of brick. You slowly pulled the spoon from your pocket. Its rounded, smooth bowl turned out to be just the thing for scraping away moss, gently, leaving no trace behind. You ran the spoon along the stone edge. Sheets of moss peeled away, lush green, soft as a wool blanket you would never own. Had someone from beyond the village seen this, they might well have thought you were a priest performing some ancient purification rite upon the village well with a sacred family spoon. When the well was clean, you moved on to the carrot bed. A few roots were already pushing up, white tips poking through the earth, bold, defiant. You pressed the hoe into the soil, but the moment you spotted a cluster of tender roots too close together, you knew the hoe would only create a mess. And so the spoon was summoned once more. You used it to scoop the earth carefully around each root, small circles, delicate, as though opening some cursed treasure. The bowl of the spoon cleared the soft soil, little by little, revealing the bright orange crown beneath, just enough to lift it out, whole. You did the same with each carrot. A slow task, but oddly satisfying, like picking grains of sand from a sock, or peeling an onion without tearing the outer skin. A small pleasure in a life full of rough edges. Next came the onions. Again, the spoon proved its worth. You used its edge to trim stray roots, to neaten the leaves. Smooth, precise movements. Had anyone been watching, they might have thought you a royal cook preparing onions for some noble dish. The truth, you were only trying to keep your onions from growing tangled like quarreling couples arguing over market coins. You sighed softly. This task, which had seemed so small, had gone far better than expected, thanks to the spoon. And then you came to the mustard greens. Tiny caterpillars were feasting there, uninvited guests. You reached in with the spoon, lifted each one gently, dropped it into a wooden bowl, a game of patience you would always lose. For every 3 you caught, 4 more slipped away. But that never troubled you. In the garden, as in the village, there are some guests you simply learn to live with. A polite nod, no expectation they will ever change. After a few more rounds through the garden, with the sun now beating stronger, you sat down by the fence. pulled out the spoon to wipe it clean. The bowl was flecked with earth, the edge stained with moss, but the wood beneath, still warm to the touch. Smooth, as in seasons past. You looked at the spoon and thought, in this world, there may be no tool more versatile. A spoon can stir porridge, divide portions, become a toy, a weapon, and now, an accidental gardening tool that works far better than expected. You smiled softly, slipped the spoon back into your pocket, stood once more. The sun was still high. The work was not yet done, but you knew whatever comes next without the spoon, everything might be far more complicated. For in a world where tools may break, dull, or disappear, the old spoon remains, steadfast, loyal, like an old hound, no longer quick on its feet, but always waiting by the door for your return. Chapter 8. Stirring medicinal water. You dare not use anything but your own spoon. You do not like sickness. No one does. But in this village, sickness does not wait to be liked. It arrives like a distant relative you've refused to invite to far too many feasts. And today, sickness has come knocking. Not for you. For your wife. Fever, cough, eyes dull as though they had seen too many winters and learned nothing from them. You do what everyone here does when faced with this. You go to find the healer. The village healer is not quite a doctor, not quite a witch. She is a curious blend, part knowledge of herbs, part mastery of gossip, part skill in convincing you to spend money you never planned to spend, on things you can barely bring yourself to swallow. You go to her. Explain the symptoms. She nods, presses her lips together, says, "Go home, prepare a pot of water, I will bring the medicine." You go home, light the hearth, boil water. And while you wait, you pull out your spoon. You know. You always know. There will come a time when the spoon must do something it was never meant to do. The healer arrives, carrying a bundle wrapped in leaves. She opens it. You can recognize some of it. A few sprigs of dried rosemary, a handful of grayish leaves, something that might be root, and a few pinches of strange powder, smelling faintly of disappointment. She tosses it all into the boiling water. The scent rises. It is not pleasant. Not fragrant. It smells of old pond mud and wilted dreams. And then she says, "Stir it, slowly, evenly. Do not let it scorch at the bottom." You look around, no stirring stick, no clean bamboo rod. She looks at you, you look at the spoon in your hand, there is no other choice. You sigh, wipe the spoon across your sleeve. An act of cleansing not recognized by any health council, but trusted by everyone in this village. You grip the spoon, lower it into the pot. You stir, slowly, evenly. The liquid swirls. Leaves rise, drifting like tiny boats caught in a sea of fate. The smell grows stronger. It clings to the spoon, to your hand, and no doubt will cling to your memory for days to come. You keep stirring. The spoon taps lightly against the bottom of the pot. A quiet scraping sound, steady, like the whispers of a blind man reading in the dark. The healer watches you, nods, satisfied. You meanwhile think, if only there were a stirring stick made just for this. But then again, you know. In the end, this spoon is still the one you trust most. It has stood by you through countless pots of porridge, many portions shared, through storms and hard days. And now, through this cloudy pot of medicine. You keep stirring, your arm begins to ache. The handle grows warm, sweat beads on your brow. You feel as though you are performing some ancient ritual, one where the prize is the worst tasting pot of liquid you will ever encounter. At last, the healer signals for you to stop. She ladles the brew into a bowl. The scent rises again. You can almost see tiny demons escaping with the steam. You set the spoon down. Look at it. The bowl of the spoon is stained brownish grey. The smell of herbs and strange powder lingers. You know the next 2 pots of porridge will taste particularly interesting, but you do not regret it. You know that when someone you love is sick, you do not entrust such a task to some unfamiliar stirring stick. You trust the one thing that has stood by you through the years, this old wooden spoon. You clean the spoon thoroughly, this time not just against your sleeve. You boil fresh water, rinse the spoon 3 times. So carefully that even your feverish wife opens one eye and mutters, "Are you casting a spell?" You smile faintly. "If I were, you'd be cured by now." You continue cleaning the spoon, carefully, as though preparing it for a royal ceremony. Only when you are certain the smell has mostly gone do you return it to your pocket. You know, tomorrow it will stir porridge again, and you do not wish to see your children staring at you, wide-eyed, when breakfast porridge smells of roots and disappointment. So you wipe it once more, slowly, carefully, the way one tends to an old friend who has just returned from battle. And as night falls, the bowl of medicine now empty, the coughing eased, you sit by the hearth, fingers running lightly along the spoon's handle. A small thing, a steadfast friend, a silent warrior in a world where nothing is ever certain. And you know, tomorrow will be a new day, and this spoon will walk beside you still, through the smallest troubles and the moments no one ever expects. Chapter 9. The Spoon and the Story of Dividing Portions. Everyone hopes the spoon divides fairly. You may not know this, but in every medieval peasant household there is a spoon regarded as a symbol of justice. Not a scepter, not a sacred sword, but a spoon, an old spoon, worn warm with the color of hearth smoke, entrusted to the one responsible for dividing the meal. And today that person is you. It is a dinner like any other. A pot of pottage placed on the stove, bubbling softly. The scent of oats, wilted greens, and sometimes, if today is a lucky day, a trace of lard left from last season's pig slaughter. One large pot, one bowl for each person, one old table, and your spoon, the official tool for dividing portions, accepted without dispute. You know well the importance of this moment. One spoonful fuller than usual can provoke glances sharp as knives. One shallow spoonful can leave the recipient feeling as insulted as if they had been called a fool in the fields. You lift the pot and place it on the table. The household gathers around, quieter than usual. In moments like this, no one needs to speak, but everyone is silently calculating. The number of bowls, the pottage left in the pot, the size of the spoon, and most importantly, the honesty of the one holding the spoon. You clear your throat softly, grip the handle of the spoon. This is not just a utensil, this is evidence. A fair divider will be respected in the house throughout the winter. One who serves unevenly will be remembered well into the following autumn. You begin with the first spoonful, poured into the bowl of the eldest in the household, an unspoken rule. The first spoonful must always be full, well-rounded, like a silent wish for health shaped from thin broth. You move to the next bowl, the second spoonful. Its fullness must be carefully considered. Too much will empty the pot too soon. Too little will leave the recipient swallowing bitterness with every bite. You continue. Steady pace, smooth motion, the spoon moves like a small boat gliding across a calm lake. Outwardly, all are silent, but inside each person is taut with attention, tracking every slow turn of the spoon. You reach the youngest child's bowl. This bowl is always given a little more, for good reason. Children must grow, and to grow, they must be fed. But too much here will draw a glare. You decide 3/4 of a spoonful, enough to avoid complaint. You continue. Spoon, bowl, pot. A silent dance, where every drop of pottage carries the weight of fairness. Then comes your wife's bowl. You know, this is the most important one. A slightly generous spoonful with a subtle stir to bring the best bits to the surface. You would not be foolish enough to let her portion appear uneven. Winter nights are long, and the cold in your wife's gaze can chill more than any wind through the roof. Finally, your own. You look into the pot. A little remains, not much. You take a moderate spoonful, not greedy, not so small that others feel guilty. A spoonful for the one who has completed the task, both a meal and a reward. You set the spoon down on the table, lift your head to look at everyone. No one says anything, but you know, no one frowns, no one looks down at their bowl with disappointment. A clear sign that you have fulfilled your role well. The meal begins. The sound of spoons meeting bowls rises steadily, softly, like a gentle lullaby in the night. Not a feast, not a grand meal, but in that moment, fairness has been preserved. And the spoon, that small, humble scepter, has once again completed its mission. You eat slowly. The pottage is plain, as always, but after a round of dividing portions without complaint, the pottage somehow goes down a little easier, and when the meal ends, you clean the spoon carefully, return it to your pocket, knowing that tomorrow and the day after, it will again serve this role. An old spoon, yes, but still a symbol of fairness, in a world where fairness is seldom guaranteed. You smile softly, for here there may be no grand justice, but as long as the dividing spoon remains in your hand, at least this fragile fairness at the dinner table will endure. Chapter 10. The Art of Spoon Tapping, a tool to call people and scare chickens. You may not believe it, but in this small peasant house, where everything is cramped, dark, and thick with kitchen smoke, the sound of a spoon tapping against the side of a pot carries more power than any church bell, and the one holding that power today is you. It begins like this. On a busy day, when the hearth has been burning since morning, the pottage has long been boiling, yet the children are still playing somewhere out in the yard. Your wife is busy shaking blankets outside, and you do not feel like shouting. First, because shouting is less effective than tapping. Second, because shouting will leave your throat hoarse, and tonight you still need to tell stories to the children. An unofficial profession taken almost as seriously as ploughing the fields. You pick up your familiar spoon, its bowl warm with smoke, its handle polished by many seasons of cooking. You tap the pot 3 times. Not fast, not slow, just enough for anyone nearby to understand. It is mealtime. Those who do not come will go without. Tap, tap, tap. The sound rings out, carries through the kitchen walls, echoes into the yard. Within moments, you hear the patter of small feet on the packed earth, the dragging of wooden sandals, and the excited whispers of children. You smile. No need to shout, no need to call. One proper tap of the spoon is enough, and it does not end with calling people. The spoon has another use, rarely mentioned, but once known, never forgotten: scaring chickens. You keep a few hens, creatures thought to be docile, but once they set their sights on invading your kitchen, little can stop them. Especially when there is a bowl of cold pottage on the kitchen table, a rare delicacy in the eyes of village hens after a long winter. One morning, you hear the frantic flapping of wings inside. You rush in to find the oldest hen, feathers fluffed, face stern like an experienced negotiator, perched on a chair, stretching its neck toward the bowl of pottage. You do not shout, you do not chase. You simply pick up your spoon, tap 3 times on the table. Tap, tap, tap. The hen pauses, tilts its head, looks at you. A calculating gaze, as if weighing whether the human before it truly has the resolve to defend that bowl of pottage. You tap again. This time faster, a little more threatening. Tap, 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 tap. The hen pulls back, hops down, runs out into the yard, leaving the bowl untouched and earning you 1 more point in the skill of scaring poultry with a spoon. Spoon tapping is not confined to the kitchen. There are times when you take the spoon out to the fields, to call the children back from the mud when you need help gathering vegetables. Tapping the spoon against a sickle produces a strange, echoing sound like a small bell lost amidst the green fields. The children hear it. They will usually run back, though sometimes with the slow deliberation of one bargaining with their own conscience. But they return, and that is what matters. Sometimes, on dark nights, when dogs howl long into the night, when the shadows of rats flicker near the grain pile, you take up your spoon, tap it lightly against a wooden post. A dry, short sound, just enough to remind those lurking creatures that this house is not empty. And on those rare occasions when the village holds a wedding or a harvest festival, when people gather outdoors, the sound of spoon tapping once again becomes the signal to begin the meal. The one assigned to the task will take a large wooden spoon and tap the pot 3 times. A simple gesture, but full of ceremony, and after those 3 taps, no one dares to cut the line, no one touches the food before they should. For everyone knows, to defy the spoon's signal is to invite the disapproval of the entire village, a social punishment worse than eating thin pottage for 3 days straight. You have performed this duty a few times, a small honor, a skill no one teaches, passed only through glances and careful practice. For you know, One mistimed tap, too fast or too slow, and the children will giggle, the adults will shake their heads, and from that day on, you will never again be entrusted with that prestigious spoon. You tap the spoon with steady hands, slowly, solemnly. The sound spreads, drawing the attention of all. And when the final note fades, the meal begins in order. A rare thing in this often chaotic world. As night falls, when everyone has returned home, you tuck the spoon back into your pocket. A small object, yet one with the power to gather, to call, to scare, to reassure, and sometimes to bring a touch of dignity into a life that knows little of it. You smile softly, run your fingers along the handle, knowing that tomorrow, when the sun rises, when the children invent new games, when the hens inch closer to the kitchen once again, the spoon will be there with you. And once more, that small sound will ring out in this humble little house. Chapter 11. The times a spoon saved you from trouble. You might think that a spoon, though a prized possession, is only useful when there is a pot of pottage, a bowl of soup, or a kettle of medicine to be stirred. But you will soon discover that, in the life of a medieval peasant, there will come moments when what you need is not a sword, not a club, but a spoon. And strangely enough, there are times when that small spoon has saved you from more trouble than you would believe. That night, the air was oppressively hot, a kind of heat not like summer days, not like the kind that comes before a storm. It was the sort of stifling heat that makes even insects impatient, that emboldens rats to test whether your bed might be soft enough to take over, and that makes the air inside as thick as pottage simmered 3 days too long without more water. You turned restlessly on your straw mat, sweat soaking your back, exhausted but unable to sleep. Your wife was asleep. The children too. In the dark, you heard a faint creak from the corner of the room. A small sound, but very clear. You sat up, listened closely. A creak, then a rustle. Rats. You sighed. Nothing unusual. Rats were permanent residents in every house in the village. But tonight, with your mood weary and irritable, you decided to teach them a lesson. You reached into your pocket. No weapon within reach, except your familiar spoon. You picked it up, felt the smooth wood beneath your fingers. A small object, but tonight it would do something great. You rose, tiptoed toward the corner. Your eyes, now adjusted to the dark, caught sight of a small shadow darting past the oat jar. A large rat, fat, walking boldly as if it had paid the rent this month. You took a deep breath, raised the spoon like a warrior raising a weapon. 1 step, 2 steps. When the rat lifted its head, you did not hesitate. You struck the side of the jar hard with the spoon. A loud thwack echoed through the house. The rat fled in panic, leaving behind a few scattered oats, an unfinished trophy. You exhaled a small victory. Once again, the spoon had not failed you. You returned to bed, placed the spoon beside your pillow for the first time in your life, feeling it might be a more trustworthy defensive weapon than any stick. Another night, in a no less absurd moment, you were called to help a neighbor chase out an aggressive rooster that had strayed into the grain barn. A task that sounds simple, but anyone who has faced a rooster knows this is no opponent to take lightly. You arrived carrying, yes, your spoon. Partly because you didn't think you'd need more. Partly because no stick in your house had survived without being turned into firewood. The rooster was large, feathers fluffed, eyes red like burning coals. It stood in the grain pile, chest puffed, looking at you with the eyes of one prepared to fight for its territory, though that territory was not its own. You exhaled, approached slowly. When only an arm's length remained, the rooster suddenly charged. No room to retreat, you raised the spoon, waving it lightly as if conducting an orchestra for winged creatures. The wooden spoon sliced through the air, making just enough noise to make the rooster hesitate. You seized the chance, took another step, waved the spoon again, this time with a distinctly more threatening tone. The rooster, after a quick decision, concluded that today was not the day to test its defenses. It turned and ran, leaving behind a crowd of witnesses, both surprised and impressed. You simply smiled, tucked the spoon back into your pocket. Once again, your spoon had not let you down. And perhaps the most amusing tale of a time your spoon saved you came from a very ordinary situation. One day at the village market, while a heated argument over post-harvest land division was underway, someone, whether from anger or too much drink, knocked your bowl of pottage to the ground. You looked at the broken bowl, your heart sinking. But instead of arguing, you quietly picked up your spoon, cleaned it, held it in your hand, your gaze steady as it swept across the crowd. No one spoke. No one dared to test their luck against someone holding a spoon and who clearly knew how to use it for more than just eating. You walked away in silence, leaving behind a crowd that had suddenly grown unnaturally quiet. And from that day on, whenever you appeared at the market with the spoon tucked in your pocket, everyone remembered that story. A small story, but enough to remind them that sometimes a spoon, if used at the right moment, can keep you safer than any words. Chapter 12. Creativity in Poverty. The spoon becomes a tool for everything. The elders in the village always say, poverty is not a crime, but staying poor for long forces you to become creative. And when you are a poor peasant living in a century no one remembers clearly, in a village where the church door wobbles more than the tooth of a 6-year-old, then creativity is how you stretch each day out, a little less miserably. That is why your spoon, originally made to scoop pottage, stir soup, and occasionally dip into honey, has soon become the most versatile tool in the house. Not because it is special, but because you simply have nothing better to use. One winter morning, with snow covering the yard, your wife decides to make bread for the children. A brave decision, but when it comes time to cut the last bit of brown yeast, you discover the knife has been chipped since its last use. You rummage through the kitchen. No knife, no usable blade, and so, as a reflex, you pull out your spoon. You use the edge of the spoon to scrape the yeast, bit by bit, much like how one scrapes candle wax off a grave on festival days. Not quick, not neat, but enough to gather some yeast for the dough. Next, when kneading the dough, your wife asks you to draw a few circles on the surface. A simple way to make the bread look as if it came from a house with good standing once it is baked. You look around, no mold, no thin blade, and so the spoon speaks again. You press the bowl of the spoon lightly onto the dough, turning it gently, creating soft circles like chicken tracks on wet earth. A decoration no one taught you, yet one that earns nods of approval from all who see it. And it does not stop there. When preparing to store the remaining honey, you find the jar lid stuck. You try twisting, try turning. No movement, once more the spoon goes to battle. You slide the edge into the gap, lever it gently. A satisfying pop rings out, like the heart of someone who has just opened the sturdiest jar in the kingdom. You scoop the honey, carefully guiding each golden drop into a small jar. The spoon's tip glistens with honey under the firelight, resembling a gem lost in a poor man's kitchen. And as the afternoon fades, you clean the house. A daily task everyone tries to postpone. You sweep the kitchen corner, find a bit of dry bran fallen into a wooden crack. No small brush at hand, you pull out the spoon, skillfully scraping out the bran as if panning for gold in a dry stream bed. In the evening, as the children play, the spoon becomes a toy once more. The youngest uses it as a small hammer, tapping rhythms onto the wooden floor. The older one holds it like a pen, drawing mysterious symbols in the dust on the table. Symbols that may later become the official candy-sharing treaty of the household. You watch the scene, smiling. In a single day, the spoon has replaced a knife, a mold, a jar opener, a small brush, a hammer, and even a pen. An achievement that would make any other household item jealous. As night falls, you sit by the fire, carefully wiping the spoon. The bowl of the spoon still holds a trace of honey's sweetness, its handle marked with bits of dried flour. You wipe it slowly, bit by bit, as though brushing away the dust of time. You know, tomorrow, the spoon will stir pottage again, tap the pot, call the children to eat, and perhaps take on a few tasks no one expects. For in poverty, you do not have much. But when you have a spoon and the eye of a creative soul, you will find you have nearly every tool you need to survive another long day. And that night, as you hang the spoon on the wooden hook by the hearth, where the fire casts soft streaks of light, you think to yourself, perhaps in this poverty, the spoon is not merely a tool, It is a small reminder that with a little ingenuity, a little patience, and sometimes a little daring, one can still get through the day. You smile, blow out the lamp. Tomorrow will sort itself out. Chapter 13. Spoons with their own legends. In your village, there are things people like to weave into legends. Sometimes it is an old oak tree whose branches touch the moon. Sometimes it is an ancient well whose bottom connects to the vast sea. And sometimes it is a spoon. It may sound hard to believe, but if you have ever lived in a village so poor that the best spoon in the house is considered an asset worthy of being sent along with a dowry, you will understand a spoon is not just a spoon. It is a witness to harsh winters, to pots of pottage cooked too long, to rare feasts when distant relatives are invited back to the village. And of course, every old spoon has its own story. A small legend, told and retold during evenings around the hearth, when the rain falls steadily outside and there is nothing else left to tell. Take, for example, the spoon of the old widow at the end of the village. It is said that it was once real silver. In her youth, her husband worked as a labourer in the Lord's castle, and upon retirement brought home a silver spoon as a keepsake. A shining, precious object kept carefully in a wooden chest. But as the years passed, the silver tarnished, green rust crept along its edges. Unable to bear seeing such a beautiful spoon left unused, one day the old woman impulsively brought it out to stir a pot of jam. The result, after 3 rounds of stirring, was that most of the silver peeled away. Silver spoon turned to copper. That story later became a village tale. Whenever someone boasts about their fine spoon, villagers only need to say, "Remember the silver spoon story from the widow's house at the end of the village?" Or the spoon belonging to the blacksmith's little boy, a broad old wooden spoon with a clear scorch mark in the bowl. It is said that the burn was not caused by carelessness, but was the ghee, result of the boy dropping the spoon into the forge while playing a game of Dragon Slayer. The story spread across the village. From then on, whenever someone saw a burned wooden spoon, they would laugh and say, "Don't let it turn into a dragon, or your spoon will end up like the blacksmith's." Then there is the spoon engraved with the old herbalist's name. A tiny spoon, its wood polished smooth, with 2 crude initials carved, the first letters of her name. It is said she carved them when she was 16, just learning to cook. That spoon has followed her through the years, from girlhood, through marriage, motherhood, and widowhood. Now, the old herbalist still uses that spoon to stir her potions. And it is rumoured that it has stirred no fewer than 100 healing brews for the villagers. The villagers jokingly call it the longevity spoon, and sometimes children visit her house just to hold it, hoping to live long. You sit by the hearth thinking about your own spoon. Not silver, not engraved, never dropped into a forge. But it has its own story, a story no one needs to tell, only you remember. You remember the day your father gave it to you when you married. An old spoon, its bowl worn thin, its handle with a small crack bound with twine. Father said only one thing. This spoon won't scorch the bottom of the pot. It stirs any dish. It serves anyone. Keep it. You have kept it. All these years, that spoon has stirred more than pottage. It has stirred medicine, stirred lard, stirred through long, weary days, when there was nothing left in the house but thin, warm water. You have used it to scare rats, to tap and call the children, to scrape moss in the garden, to scoop the last drops of honey. A small companion, steadfast, without complaint. Sometimes you wonder, if one day your child holds this spoon, will they think it is just an old spoon? Or will they remember that once, in a small smoke-filled kitchen, there was a father who stirred with this very spoon through a lifetime? You do not know. You do not need to know. You only know that tonight, after washing the bowl clean, you will hang it back in its usual place, where the firelight will cast soft shadows. And the spoon, though it does not gleam, will stand there, a small testament to the perseverance of those too poor to let their minds grow poorer. And tomorrow morning, when the hearth is lit again, that spoon will continue its story. Chapter 14. Losing a spoon, a miserable day. You can lose many things in life. A pair of shoes, a chicken, a sack of turnips brought to trade but forgotten to pay the blacksmith. Those things, once lost, you feel regret. But losing a spoon is different. Losing a spoon is a quiet sorrow, weaving through every minute of the day, as if you've lost part of an arm. A piece of your survival instinct in a world that has no place for those who don't know how to stir pottage properly. That day, everything started out normal. A morning with thin mist covering the garden out back, a pot of pottage bubbling on the hearth. You stirred the pottage as always, a steady rhythm, smooth. Left hand steadying the pot, right hand holding the spoon, a movement now ingrained as instinct. Then someone called you from the gate. You placed the spoon on the kitchen shelf, a safe spot. At least you thought so. Matters at the gate dragged longer than expected. The blacksmith came to collect the turnip debt from the previous week. You rummaged through the storehouse, bargained with 2 eggs instead. A tense negotiation, eating up nearly a quarter of the morning. When you returned to the kitchen, the spoon was gone. You looked around. The kitchen table was bare. You searched the cupboards, looked under the table, even stirred the pot of pottage as if the spoon might have slipped inside to retire. No sign of it. You asked your wife. She shrugged. I didn't touch it. You asked the children. They chorused, we swear we didn't borrow it. A vow you knew carried the same weight as a cat, promising never to sneak into the kitchen again. You tore apart the whole kitchen, checked under the counter, behind the firewood, even lifted the cloth covering the rice bin. Sweat soaked your back. Your heart pounded like a war drum. Lost spoon. A day without a spoon means a day of borrowing one. And borrowing a spoon is a form of social humiliation in this village. You had no choice but to go to the neighbor's house. Standing at the gate, knocking softly, "Could I borrow a spoon?" The neighbor looked at you as if you'd just confessed to not knowing how to tie your own shoes. But she rummaged through her things and handed you a wooden spoon. Bigger than usual, chunky, short-handled, a spoon neither balanced nor as supple as yours. You brought the spoon back, put it into the pottage. From the very first stir, you knew this strange spoon didn't fit your hand. Its bowl was too large, stirring unevenly. It felt like trying to row a tiny boat across a frozen lake. That morning, the pottage burned slightly on the bottom. No one spoke of it, but all eyes were on you as you served the pottage, a look that held a bit of pity, a hint of mild amusement. You ate with the strange spoon. Its handle chafed your hand. Its bowl made an annoying clack-clack against the bowl. Your youngest whispered, "Our spoon is better." You only nodded, saying nothing. That day, everything felt out of sync. Stirring herbal water, the strange spoon stirred unevenly. Scooping honey, the strange spoon didn't fit the jar. Calling the children, the sound was strange, like the hollow knock of an old church bell. You felt like a musician forced to play a borrowed violin from someone who didn't know music. By the afternoon, with frustration rising past tolerance, you searched the kitchen again. Every crack, every dark corner. And then, after 3 rounds of searching, beneath the dishcloth, you saw the handle sticking out. Relief surged like cool well water after a long drought. You pulled the spoon out, lifted it to inspect. Still whole, the familiar scent of the hearth. The small scratch on the handle still there, like an old friend's greeting. You wiped the spoon carefully, as one might clean a sword hilt before battle. And that night, the pottage was stirred with your familiar spoon. Smooth, even, no burning. The children watched you stir, smiling. Your wife said nothing, but when she ladled the pottage, she gave a small nod, a silent signal that the order of the small universe had been restored. You understood. A day without a spoon is a miserable day, not just because of the pottage, not just because of borrowing, but because you lose a piece of life's rhythm, a small object that carries with it a certainty you can trust in this uncertain world. And that night, as you hung the spoon back on the wooden hook by the hearth, you exhaled in quiet relief. A simple but profound lesson. Never, no matter how busy you are, place the spoon somewhere you'll forget. For when you lose your spoon, the entire day goes as crooked as a wheel without a rim. Chapter 15. Ending. Night falls, the spoon hanging on the wall as a quiet reminder, night has fallen. A kind of night not as clear as a folk song, nor shimmering like a painted scene, but a thin blanket covering everything in the village. Heavy, damp with the scent of hearth smoke, the smell of wild grass cut earlier in the afternoon. In the small kitchen, the glow from the stove flickers faintly. You sit there, alone, your hand holding the familiar spoon, gently turning it in your palm as if speaking to an old friend. This spoon has journeyed through a long day with you. A day of morning pottage, midday herbal water, the game of knocking on pots to frighten the chickens as evening fell, and a warm dinner where, as always, it once again served as the most just distributor in the household. Now, with everything settled, with the wind outside whispering like the weary sigh of the sky itself, you sit there, slowly wiping away the bits of flour lingering on the spoon's bowl, the drops of honey dried along its handle, the faint smoke stains clinging to its smooth wooden surface as if brushing away the dust of a long day from the shoulders of a silent friend who has never once broken its promise. You slowly stand unhurried, for the night is long, and no one is urging you to do anything quickly now. You walk toward the wall beside the stove, where the old wooden hook still waits, that small hook all these years, reserved only for this spoon, as if among the thousands of objects in the house, Banazisasi, only it deserves a place of its own. You hang the spoon up, letting it gently sway beneath the fading light of the fire, its shadow stretching along the wooden wall like a clock without hands, a reminder that here time is not counted in hours nor in days, but by the rhythm of stirred pottage, by each meal shared equally, and by the resilience of the smallest things that are kept through the years. You step back a little, eyes still watching the spoon resting quietly there, like a silent sentry guarding the peace of this small kitchen where each day begins and ends with its gentle taps on the pot, on the table, on the hearts of those in the house. You smile softly, no need for anyone to see, and perhaps that very spoon, if it could understand, would smile back in return. And you know when the last ember fades, when the night thickens another layer, when the breathing of your loved ones around you grows deeper, steadier, that spoon in the warm darkness of this kitchen will still rest there, waiting for the morning, waiting for yet another day to once more accompany you, to stir each new circle of pottage, to mark the mornings with gentle knocks, to divide those simple but warm meals, and no matter how much the world out there may change, the rhythm of life in this small house with that spoon hanging on the wall will still continue on, slowly, day by day. And now, as the spoon rests quietly upon the wooden wall, as the stove holds only a few fading embers, as the wind outside the eaves seems weary as well, you can let yourself slow down. You have traveled with me through a long day in the life of a small spoon, stirring, tapping, dividing, scaring chickens, saving the day, becoming a toy, then returning once again to its place, quietly like an old friend who is always there, asking for nothing more than to keep accompanying you into the next. Deco. And perhaps in our own lives, there are small things just like that. A spoon, an old cup, a worn cloth. Things that may seem trivial, yet are an irreplaceable part of the rhythm of each day. So, if you are still awake, and perhaps your pillow feels a little softer now, let yourself relax just a bit more. And now, as the last ember is about to fade, as the spoon hanging upon the wall becomes no more than a soft shadow in the dark, you can close your eyes and let sleep come. For in the morning, that spoon will still be waiting for you.